Hello, this is Kyle Filson of Expanded Perspectives. Expanded Perspectives is an audio podcast where we focus on ancient history, alternative history, cryptozoology, UFOs, the paranormal, and all things bizarre. Please visit our website at www.expandedperspectives.com. Subscribe to the show on iTunes and here on YouTube. You can follow the show on Facebook and Twitter. If you like what you hear, please be sure to rate and write a review for us on iTunes. It really helps us out. Thanks again for listening. We hope you enjoy.
Howdy, folks, and thank you so much again for joining us here on Expanded Perspectives. Well, like I said, I was going to change it up a bit. You know who we are. I'm Cam. This over here is Kyle, and we are going to have a great show for y'all today. We had a great time doing it. Great interviews with Mr. Carl Lehrburger, and man, one of the things, it was a fun book. I learned a lot of stuff that I didn't know. We discussed off air with him, a bunch of cool things, but we're gonna have a good show today.
It was really
entertain the heck out of y'all.
It was really interesting speaking with Carl. He's a great guy. It's a fantastic book, Secrets of Ancient America. I suggest everyone go out there and buy it. It really is. I mean, it's got a lot of cool stories about the visitors that were here pre-Columbus. I mean,
there were still things I didn't know. We talked more about the caves and stuff. I'm like, dang, I want to go visit some of these. But like he brought up, a lot of them are on private land. It'd be, you don't just get to walk onto somebody's backyard and check around the stuff that they got.
Well, let's get into the news. Cam, did you see this from the Telegraph? Soldiers could have their bones copied and 3D printed.
I'm so excited about that.
In case of injury, right? Now,
yes.
Experts say that soldiers could be scanned before deploying and a twin kept online so that new bones could be 3D printed if they happen to get injured while they're in battle. Now, that's pretty cool.
I love it. I love the idea of it.
Now, experts at the University of Nevada are in discussion with the U.S. military to create records of virtual soldiers, which could be referred back to by Army surgeons. Now, the team already uses virtual operating tables to practice dissection and help medical students learn about the anatomy of the human body. This is pretty cool. These tables work by taking X-rays, ultrasounds, and MRIs to create an exact replica of a human body, so that the trainee doctors can see inside the body with great detail. But the experts are now in talks to the use of this technology to scan healthy people to create a personal three-dimensional record so that it can be compared with later scans after someone has an injury. Now, scientists believe it could be particularly useful for creating state-of-the-art limbs for wounded soldiers because the exact dimensions of their limbs will be recorded in 3D detail. Now, speaking at a conference in San Jose, California, Dr. James Ma, Director of Advanced Education Program in Orthodontics at the University of Nevada, said that the discussions were already taking place to bring this technology to the battlefield. He says the idea is to have an image somebody when they have a healthy state so that the data is available at a later point. We do have soldiers that are injured. They lose limbs, and it's a challenge to reconstruct. The thinking is that if we do an image beforehand, they might be able to 3D print a new femur, which could provide a template to facilitate surgical repair later on in the field. The technology could help many of our war casualties and veterans. Now, for soldiers that lose limbs, it would mean that there's a virtual version of their own bodies that could exist. So anything that happened to them, they could reproduce it.
Well, I love the fact, too, that they call it a reusable cadaver. The table that they do all the
It's
testing
a virtual
on.
autopsy table. They said they have. They said it's like
it's the best practice.
He says it's and this is designed by a U.S. firm called Anatomage. He says it's about the size of a door, like the front door in your house, but it's a large screen. It's like a giant iPad. It's an iPad the size of a door, which shows a life-size body. I'm sorry, and you can manipulate it in 3D dimensions.
And you can change the body. They say it holds like 1,000 of them right now is what they have in it, in the hard drives.
Yeah, it says that tissues...
I love that.
Tissues can be sliced with the swipe of a finger. Muscles and ribs can be stripped away that are normally difficult to reach. It's a reusable cadaver. You know, he says the benefit is that we can look right through the body without any difficulty at all. We can peel away with the skin right down through the muscles and organs right to the brainstem. And much like you said, you don't have to keep using cadavers because apparently this whole time... doctors and surgeons have to be trained on real human cadavers that are donated.
Yeah.
And they can be quite costly. And he said that the donations of these human cadavers has actually been decreasing steadily over the last 20 years. Now you don't need it. It's a virtual person.
Well, there's lots of ways. I'm wondering how long before it gets to be not just the new thing, but it gets to be affordable to where when you go into a doctor's office, they scan you. When you go into like a new family physician, you get scanned. And they go, okay, here's your starting point. So now we can always go back and look at bone deterioration over you.
Exactly.
Like women that deal with osteoporosis, you can go back and look at all the deterioration and all that. And when I saw this about the bones, and they were first talking about that, the first thing I thought of too was how long before they have a material that represents bone so well that, well, they'll take a scan of you like just anybody, let's just say, like say an athlete, a sports athlete or anything like that, or like a soldier. And when there's something happens, they can 3D print that exact same bone out in maybe your DNA sample. They grow it, they 3D print it, and then they can just replace it right there in your body. And it doesn't reject, it works perfect. Like if you broke this, they can take this section, replace this. It's coming. Things like that. I think you're going to actually see that.
Maybe not in our lifetime, but I think that's what's going to happen.
It's your, man, it feels like it's going that way. Well, I got something a little bit different than that, and we're going to be talking about history. I don't know if you saw this. The BBC came out with this, and we've always talked about drones, and people love to send us stuff on the drones, and you and I have even discussed, I would love to have one, just to have a camera on and fly it around and mess around with it. Well, now scientists are talking about using these drones to scan what they call ancient Amazonia. They're going to scan the Brazilian rainforest to look for evidence of ancient civilization occupation there.
That's cool.
That's an awesome way of using it.
I want a drone. I want my own.
Well, you've always heard the stories of people flying over the Amazon and they see like temples and stuff down in there, but they don't ever, you can't like, GPS it and circle and circle and circle. Well, now they're going to have the ability where guys can fly these drones. Now, you and I have discussed they probably don't fly as long, but who knows what they're going to use? Maybe they come up with a gas-powered drone. Who knows how big these drones are? We're not talking about little suitcase drones and stuff that these guys are probably going to be used. It says this. It says a drone will be sent up with a laser instrument to peer through the canopy for earthworks that were constructed thousands of years ago. The UK-led project is trying to determine how big these communities were and to what degree they altered the landscape. The data is likely to inform policies on sustainable forest use today. So they want to make sure that they can save parts of this thing. Now, researchers announced the initiative at the annual meeting of the American Association for the Advancement of Science, and it has just won a 1.7 million euro grant from the European Research Council.
That's cool.
It says the key quest is to try and understand the scale and activities of populations living in the late pre-Columbian period, which is the last they consider 3,000 years before the Europeans arrived in the 1490s.
Right.
So it sounds to me like this is going to be awesome, and maybe it's going to basically show us some other things that maybe we didn't know were there. It makes me think there's a woman named Holly Alberg, and she has allegedly discovered a site in Chile. I don't know if anybody's aware of this, but she did it using, it's out in the Atacama Desert, but she did it using like Google Earth. She was on Google Earth, scrolling and looking around through stuff and found some things and kind of zoomed in on it and all that. And then she put together an expedition there, and they went and found it. And it's an old civilization. Like,
isn't that incredible?
It's wild.
Spotted from Google Maps.
Exactly. Pretty much is what it is. So maybe this Brazilian Amazon drone scan thing will be another deal that'll really work out. I hope so. I really, really hope so. I'm pretty stoked about this whole thing. Now, There's a Dr. Jose Arat from Exeter University, and he said it's a hot debate right now in New World archaeology. He says, while some researchers think that Amazonia was inhabited by small bands of hunter-gatherers and shifting cultivators who had a minimal impact on the environment, and that the forest we see today is pristine and untouched for thousands of years, mounting evidence is showing that this may not be the case.
Right?
That this evidence suggests that Amazonia may have been inhabited by large, numerous, complex, and hierarchical societies that have had major impact on the environment. And that what we call cultural parkland hypothesis is what he told the BBC. So I'm stoked, man. I
think it's pretty cool.
I can't wait.
Well, speaking of ancient cultures, did you see this? This comes from the National Geographic News. Archaeologists have stumbled across a hoard of gold, Cam.
Oh, they found some more?
A cache of medieval Arab gold coins may already be the largest in the eastern Mediterranean that they've ever found, and he said that there's probably more to come. Now, this was posted by Kristen Rami, and an unprecedented discovery of more than 2,000 gold coins off the north-central coast of Israel might be part of the largest gold hoard ever found in the eastern Mediterranean, according to archaeologists. The coins are identified as dinars, which is the official currency of the Fatimid Caliphate, I don't know how you say that, who ruled much of the Mediterranean from 909 to 1171. Now, the find was made by accident in early February when a team of 6 sport divers spotted what they initially thought were a few toy coins on the seabed near the ancient harbor of Caesarea. Now, after realizing the significance of the find, they immediately notified the Israeli Antiquities Authority, or the IAA.
Gotcha.
IAA. Now, divers from the IAA Marines Archaeology Unit accompanied the group back to the site and were stunned when they saw what these people had found. Now, he says, we were told that the divers had found about 30 or 40 coins. Usually that means that they found a hoard. So we went back and performed a small excavation. After 2 hours, we had found something like 1,000 coins. He says, we were shocked.
Wow.
We were so incredibly excited, but when you're underwater, you can't talk to each other. It was only when we surfaced and pulled our regulators off that we started screaming with happiness.
Right.
But he said that was just the beginning. Another 1,000 coins were recovered from the site just this last Tuesday, which already makes the find at least 5 times larger than what was previously discovered up until this time. Now, though the discovery of gold always captures everyone's imagination, it's the historical value of the cache that researchers are so dazzled about. The dinars featured the names of the caliphs, and they were minted and who they were minted under, as well as the date and location of where they were minted. He said that these are first-class historical documents, explains Robert Kuhl, one of the curators. The cursory study reveals that the earliest coin from this hoard so far was minted in Palermo, Sicily, while the majority came from the official Fatimid mints in Egypt and other parts of North Africa. The dates seem to come from around 996 to 1021 AD. So some of the recovered coins appear to be in mint condition, they said.
That's so cool.
But others have obviously been in circulation for some time. Several of the coins, get this, show tooth marks, where skeptical merchants of the time must have performed a bite test to assess the authenticity of the pure goldness of these coins.
That's awesome.
So they've done some studies with their spectrometers and microscopes and stuff. And initial tests show that these are 24 karat gold with purity up to 95%. So these are almost pure gold coins. That's pretty cool, right? The tooth marks, even you could tell back in the day people were checking them.
That's really cool.
Pretty neat.
Dude, I love that. Well, I got a real quick one before we jump into the interview right quick here. This has come out, and it's kind of making its rounds around the internet. And if you go to Neatorama.com, I believe where it actually originated from. But there is a statue of Buddha that was in China, and it's just recently last year left China for the first time. And the Drents Museum, an art and history museum in the Netherlands, actually arranged for this. But basically, it looks like a copper statue of Buddha,
right,
sitting in the lotus position. They scanned it, just like a CT scan on it.
Right.
It's got a skeleton in it.
Are you kidding?
It's a mummified monk from around 1100.
So it's a sarcophagus is basically what it is.
From 1100 AD. They were like, this isn't just a regular statue. Everybody thought it was. They built the statue around his mummy.
That's incredible. This whole time they thought it was just a statue.
Exactly.
There's a person in it.
A Buddhist monk that was around from around 1100 AD. So y'all can pull it up. It's really interesting. You can see CT scans they've done in it, and it's crazy, but it makes you start wondering, maybe you need to go back and scan all the rest of these things.
Right?
Go back and jump on that. Well, folks, before we jump in here, we're going to talk to Mr. Carl Lehrburger. Now, for those of you that don't know, Carl is an environmental activist. He's a renewable energy entrepreneur, researcher, author. He actually founded with his he's an executive manager and founder of Pure Vision Technologies and Pure Hemp Technologies. Now, him and his brother founded Pure Vision in 1992. And then, of course, they actually developed apparently a big advancing breakthrough in biorefining technology. So he's all about taking care of the world. So once, of course, you get into taking care of Mother Nature, you kind of get into history. Well, that's kind of what sent Carl down the path. And then he's been published in Ancient American Magazine. And then, of course, he's written like the book we discussed earlier, which is Secrets of Ancient America. And we had a great time talking to him. And it was fun all the way around. So stick with us. On the other side of the break, you're going to get your dose of ancient American history. You're listening to Expanded Perspectives. Folks, we got a treat today on today's show. We've got a good friend of ours going to jump in here with us, talk a little history of ancient America. We got Mr. Carl Lehrburger, and we're going to have him chat with us about his book, Secrets of Ancient America. Carl, how are you doing?
Hi, Kyle, and hi, Cam, and greetings to Expanded Perspective Radio listeners. I'm doing great.
Man, we are really happy to have you come on. The book was great, man. It's got so much stuff. We don't even know where to start. I mean, like Kyle and I've said here, we've written notes, we've gone through it. It's another one of those books I would tell everybody they need to go ahead and stick in the library if they're into anything that's pre-Columbian style history in America. This is one of those ones you're going to want to put in your library. So we're going to just jump right into it and start talking. Kyle's got all kinds of questions for you. He's giddy like a child, Carl, so I better let him go ahead and start chatting.
Hey, Carl, the first thing I would like to bring up is let's get it known that when Columbus first set sail on the ocean blue in 1492, that he did not think that the world was flat. In fact, Aristophanes had already figured out the circumference and the diameter of the world, many years before that. Also, Columbus probably had access to Viking and Arab maritime maps. But I think mainstream society still believes that when Columbus set sail that he thought the world just ended and that it was flat.
It's crazy. One of the things that I discovered in my journey of writing this book, Secrets of Ancient America, is that we've all been lied to about our history and that the historical record has been expunged. The book starts out with the myth of Columbus, and I call it a myth because we're told that he was seeking a passage to India. And this was a total fabrication, is what I came to learn. He knew about the Americas from maps that he had access to. Most of the maps came from the Arabs that had to leave Toledo. They left 11 libraries intact in Spain. And these libraries contained literature, astronomy, all sorts of things that actually spurned the Renaissance. But we don't hear too much about the maps that were left by the Arabs. And I believe that the Columbus brothers, Bartholomew and Christopher Columbus, had access to these maps and were able to not only used the trade winds to get to America that were documented in these maps, but he knew how long it was going to take and how much that he needed. Interestingly enough, his wife Philippa was intermarried with the Drummond Sinclair family of the very famous Henry Sinclair, Prince of Orkney Islands, who reportedly traveled to America in the 1300s. So he had access to these Viking maps as well. And what we find is that this myth that he was going to India, or that this is just not reasonable when you consider that the gifts that Columbus bought were not worthy of a king, but he bought trinkets, for natives and things like that. So the whole story of Columbus is to a large extent an invention. And why? And what's being covered up? Well, we now know that Columbus was really the first to establish slavery in the Americas, and it was Columbus who instigated the genocide of Native Americans along with the confiscation of their lands. So this is what the church and who I like to call the archaeopriest community is holding up as the great discoverer of America. But what I and many writers have concluded is that Columbus wasn't first; he was the last, really, to come to America before it was settled and became what it is today.
Yeah, and let's talk about some of these ancient cultures that were here well before Columbus. Let's start out with the Phoenicians. Now, what do you know about the Phoenicians and their presence here?
Well, the Phoenicians were the great mariners of the ancient world. And, one of the questions that I'm always asked when I talk about the old world peoples in the new world is, how did they get here? And this is really such a disconnect of us moderns, not being able to understand the wisdom and the knowledge of the ancients. These were not only great explorers, but they knew navigation, shipbuilding, astronomy, astrology, geography, and most people don't realize that the vessels of the Phoenicians and early Celts and some of the Indus Valley cultures that made it to America, their ships were 10 times as big as Columbus's ships. So the Phoenicians were really the earliest of these mariners that came over here for commerce, and that commerce was driven by gold, silver, and copper. Now we know that the richest sources of copper in the ancient world came from Michigan. This was like 99% pure copper that was very easily mined near the surface, and it really fueled the Bronze Age throughout the world. So the Phoenicians, as the masters of commerce, not only had their own merchant marines, but other nations of the ancient world contracted with them to bring over mining parties and explorers. So it was the Phoenicians that came here early on, and we know they were here from some of the artifacts that were left. We do find some of the writings in rocks in New England, but some of the best evidence of the Phoenicians that I found is in South America. There's a collection of artifacts that was gathered by a Father Carlo Crespi of Ecuador, and he, I think, died in the 1980s. But before he died, he amassed a collection of hundreds, if not thousands, of artifacts. Now, most of these artifacts that were provided by natives in Ecuador that loved Crespi were not Old World, but many of them were. And some of these were golden plates that had Assyrian images and Assyrian writing that goes back many thousands of years. Now, being gold, these artifacts have pretty much disappeared, and with the corruption and the anti-diffusionist attitude that prevails in the academic communities. But there are surviving photographs of these and firsthand accounts that they existed, and they clearly show a very sophisticated writing and documentation. And when people say, well, they could have been faked, no, I don't think anyone is going to go to the extent of faking an Assyrian tablet on gold.
Yeah, right.
Now, we also have in 1877, when the famous Nez Perce Indian chief Chief Joseph was captured by General Miles. Chief Joseph presented the general with a pendant that he was wearing, and this pendant was a cuneiform writing on this pendant that a later day researcher believes was written in an Assyrian and goes back 4,000 years. This artifact, I believe, is still in the possession of the U.S. government. So, there are artifacts, there are inscriptions in stone in New England, and there's even cuneiform writing that can be found in America that document the great explorations of the Phoenicians to the New World.
Well, and just like you were saying, they were subcontracted almost out to do all the shipping, it seems like, because the Phoenicians were so good at sailing. And I remember one time I was reading about, like you were talking about, the large copper mines there in Isle Royale in Michigan, and it was quite a procedure. I mean, I think they said there was probably 50 to 100,000 people working there nonstop for maybe 1,000 years, mining millions of tons of copper, and that they've been able to test and prove that same copper has been found in even Minoan shipwrecks in the Mediterranean and other things like that. I guess they can test the purity of the copper. And it's amazing that that much of that is just not taught in school. At least it wasn't when I was in school. But in addition to the Phoenicians, the Romans, too, it seems like they were here. Did you talk about some of the artifacts that the Romans have left behind?
Well, the Romans, were clearly here. We know they were here because of different waves of coins that have washed up, some being Roman, and I cite in the book a Roman coin found in near Springfield, Colorado, when they were digging a well 3 feet below the surface. One of the most significant evidences that Romans made it here are relics that remain from a community that was named Calalis in southern Arizona, near Tucson. And in the early 1900s, 32 relics were dug up. Of these, there were a handful of very large crosses that were made or a layer of lead. And on these lead crosses, written in Latin, is the history of this community called Calalis that started in the mid-765 and ran for about little under 250 years, when the scribe who is writing all this in kind of a broken Latin talks about the demise of the Calalis community due to the Native Americans. They were under siege. And this story is encapsulated between the wars between the citizens of Calalis and the what's referred to as the Toltecs in this. And what's so fascinating is that the symbols that are shown on these, not only the crosses, but religious objects that were dug up, is a fresh combination of Jewish and early Christian cultures. So you see the cross, but you also see writing in Hebrew, and it's just a fascinating period of history that you get a glimpse of from these relics. Now, the members of this community were Jewish Romans, and it's quite likely that they fled Europe because of persecution. It's not really said in the record, but this is a case of later day Romans that did make it apparently all the way to Arizona, perhaps up the Rio Grande River. But there's also evidence in Brazil, off the coast of Brazil, and off the coast of Central America, where there are these very large Roman, vases that they used to, carry oils and wines. Now, these have been discovered in several locations and have clearly been identified as Roman from thousands of years ago. Like many cases of artifacts that point to a old world origin, the archaeological community has just done everything they could to cover these up, and in some cases with the collusion of governments, so that even though you have cases well documented and well reported, to go back and find these artifacts or to get a first-hand account is nearly impossible, as was the case with the Carlo Crespi collection. That's why the best evidence, the smoking gun evidence, if you will, that proves old world travelers came to America is the writing in caves and the inscriptions and the petroglyphs that can't be moved. They really, it's very difficult to fake, and we can maybe talk about that later. So the evidence of the Romans includes not only the artifacts that have been dug up from the ocean, but actual artifacts that written in Latin that describe a colony in Arizona that existed for nearly 250 years.
I'm glad you brought up the caves too, Carl, because I was wanting to talk to you about archaeoastronomy. And you were bringing up the fact of a smoking gun. It's not just speculation. There's actually a use for archaeoastronomy to line up these carvings and things that's been found in these caves and on certain stones to point to a time of when that was actually done. Can you tell the people what kind of give them a rundown of what archaeoastronomy is?
Well, archaeoastronomy is a relatively new area of study, but in reality, it's an ancient language that the ancients used, and we can think of an archaeologist looking down at the ground and kind of digging and looking for an artifact. But what an archaeoastronomer does is really look up and to see how the movement of the planets and of the sun had an effect on the construction of dwellings, monuments, and petroglyphs. So, as an example, one of the most famous archaeoastronomical sites in Europe is Newgrange in Ireland, where a very giant mound on the winter solstice, the rising sun penetrates this giant mound and strikes the back of this mound and conjuncts or strikes a petroglyph. And it's the lining up of the sun coming through the cave, hitting that petroglyph at the exact time, which is what an archaeoastronomer is looking for. And so that looking at a site like a Stonehenge, it took some moderns hundreds of years really to figure out that Stonehenge was a calendar. It was a clock, a cosmic clock that was able to calculate the equinoxes, the solstices, and even the extreme positions of the moon. Now, what we have in Europe are monumental archaeoastronomical sites like Newgrange and Stonehenge. But the most of the archaeoastronomy we see in North America, both ancestors to the Native Americans and Old World archaeoastronomy, is petroglyphic or micro. Now there are monumental archaeoastronomy sites in North America with an Old World origin. Perhaps the most famous of these is a site called America's Stonehenge in southern New Hampshire, and a mine that around a rise in a hill where there are Celtic-like dwellings made out of stone chambers. On the outside of this very large site, there's monuments that line up to the sun's position on the horizon. So standing in the center of this site, you can sight to the sun and know when the equinoxes, when the solstices, when the cross-quarter days, which are the Celtic festivals that are equal distance between the equinoxes and the solstices. For example, May Day is originally was Beltane or Beltane, can be seen from America's Stonehenge. However, as we get into the West and look at the evidence for the Celts, as I said, it's the ancients used the language of archaeoastronomy and integrated it into their art. So in the case of some of the caves that are mentioned in the book, Secrets of Ancient America, including Anubis Cave, which kudos to you guys. You had a show that talked about Anubis Caves in Oklahoma, but there are others, including a sunrise equinox cave in Colorado called Crack Cave, and another cave in Colorado that is a cross-quarter day alignment. These present, I think, evidence that the Celts were here. Now, people say, why couldn't the Native Americans have done this? Well, the ancestors to the Native Americans not only could have, they did. But what we find in a handful of examples in Colorado, Kansas, and in Oklahoma in particular, is that these archaeoastronomy events that occur on the equinoxes and on cross-quarter days are accompanied by inscriptions that can be read in a Celtic language. They're inscribed in a writing system called Ogham, or often pronounced Om, so that we can read about what is about to take place. For example, in the Crack Cave in Colorado, the Celtic inscription reads, "On the day of Bel, the sun will strike here." And it's sure enough, on the day of the equinox, as the sun pierces the horizon and begins to rise, the sun streams into this very narrow cave and grazes the side of the cave wall that describes in Celtic language, the sun is going to hit here on this particular day. And it's so precise. There are tick marks like a clock, so that 3 days before the event, the equinox event, that the sun will graze, but it not strike where it indicates it, but it will hit that tick mark on the third day. So it's a very precise calendar, and it is accompanied by writing. And as you noted on your previous show of Anubis Cave, we have multiple evening equinox alignments that are also accompanied by inscriptions, and it's quite remarkable to witness these. And in fact, it's really part of the inspiration for me to write the book, to try to share not only the excitement that one gets of seeing a piece of ancient history that is foreign to most Americans, but also to be witnessing the event.
Yeah, I can imagine.
It's like a light show, and it's so easy to understand why they've been missed. If you're an archaeologist and looking down and looking for an artifact, you're going to really miss, this language of the ancients. And it's so profound because it's not a single dimensional thing like, the sun just hits this one target on this day, and let's celebrate that the equinox is here. No, it's it's so much more compelling when you get into it that they've tied in their cosmologies with their celebrations, and in the case of the Anubis cave, it's not just the sun god and the god of death, but you also find Celtic goddesses that are clearly shown in these caves. For example, the Celtic goddess Sheila na gig, which is a very specific goddess, and you find her almost a spitting image of how she is depicted in Irish mythology. So it's an incredible story, and you really can't get the story unless you're looking up. You got to look. You can't just look down, or you just can't look at the petroglyphs. But you got to look up to really understanding that the ancients are talking about not only what's going on in this world, but in a much greater dimension in the cosmological sense.
It's one of those things. I'm blown away by it because of, like you said, I mean, there's so many other ways to research these things, but if you're not looking for those exact things, you miss it, and that's a big part of the story. That's a big part of what tells the whole story. And you pointed to like you saying, the smoking gun. It does seem like the Celts are the ones that are, I guess, for the lack of the better term, they're kind of like the founders of what's going on and all the wild stuff that's found over here as far as rock solid proof, as far as something you can really sink your teeth into. I guess, what else did they do? I mean, they talk about the Phoenicians being great sailors. I guess the Celts had to be pretty good themselves in order to get here.
Well, I believe that many of these ancient peoples that came here were here mostly for commerce. But I think the case can be made that the Celts had a stronghold in New England. And you could almost call New England New Ireland in a way because of the incredible Celtic presence. And there are stone chambers throughout New England. The museums, some of the museums in Vermont have artifacts that have this Ogham writing system with mentioning again the sun god Bel and Grian. But they set out from New England stronghold and expanded in a quest both to explore and looking for more gold and copper. And it's following the river systems from the New England strongholds that I think led them to find the Arkansas River from the Mississippi, and then from the Arkansas River into some of the smaller river systems in Kansas, Oklahoma, and Colorado, where there seems to be what my mentor Bill McGlone called the Ogham Corridor, where there are really a handful of sites. And I think this is an important point to make, that of the, I'd say, tens of thousands, many tens of thousands of petroglyphs, perhaps hundreds of thousands of petroglyphs in North America, it's a very small number, 0.0001%, if that we can directly say came from Europe, or came from the Mediterranean, or came from Indo-Turkey. But there is a predominance of these, and in the case of the Celts, I'd say there's at least a half a dozen smoking guns, where you have the writing, you have the petroglyphs, and then you have the alignments that confirm what the inscriptions say.
Now, you brought up Crack Cave, and it's one of those things I didn't even know they existed. Out of all, I've never even heard it. It was almost so much of this stuff you talk about and actually bring to light. A lot of it's kind of hush hush, or it's kind
on private land.
Yeah, it's kept quiet almost intentionally. But when you brought up talking about Crack Cave, and also we talked about the Anubis Cave and the fact, but there's another Cave Hollow in Kansas also has a way of with solstice lineups and the lighting in there also, doesn't it?
It does, and it's being at the right place at the right time, and to know what you're looking for. The point that you make about Crack Cave, I think, is worth elaborating on. Crack Cave is a cave that's located on Comanche National Grasslands in southern Colorado, And my two mentors, Bill McGlone and Philip Leonard, spent decades, researching Crack Cave and Anubis Cave, and they were the ones that really were able to crack the, pun intended, crack the code, crack the Ogham, and do the archaeoastronomy, the hard work. And through their efforts, it went beyond the research. They were instrumental in getting the cave protected, to get Comanche National Grasslands to put a metal fence in there. So while Bill was alive, and there was just a lot of enthusiasm in southeastern Colorado, there used to be at least a yearly pilgrimage that was coordinated with Comanche National Grasslands, and on the day of the equinox, there would be an organized tour. And before the sun comes up, there would be, maybe 20 cars and headlights piercing the dark on this dirt road leading into Crack Cave, and the ranger would open up the gate, and you'd proceed through the area that was called Picture Canyon until you get to the cave, and the viewers would be able to stand in line and wait their turn, and then make it in to see the actual alignment. And Bill McGlone would be stationed there and kind of explain what's going on and what's Ogham and what's a tick mark that would tell the days leading up to and after the equinox. So this went on for a good decade or so, and is relatively popular. But with the passing of Bill and the continued assault on the diffusionist perspective that the ancients from overseas made it here, what they call the Equinox Festival in Springfield, Colorado, has not been held for years. And the last one that I went to, the Comanche National Grasslands Ranger, who was standing there and would let you go in, they didn't mention anything about Ogham or Celts. We believe these are created by the ancestors of the Native Americans, and there are some people who think that they're from overseas, and that's about it. This is in spite of the decades of research, and I'm talking solid research by in the case of Bill, he was an engineer, and in the case of Phil Leonard, he was a professional researcher, and they became self-taught epigraphers who learned how to read the Ogham. Well, the point of the story is that even though it's been demonstrated, at least to me, without a doubt, it's 100% proof that they were here. The Comanche National Grasslands archaeologists will have nothing to do with that, and really dismiss those ideas. So here we're looking right at the gatekeepers, and credit to Comanche National Grasslands for getting the metal fence up to protect this site, because these petroglyphs are in very fragile sandstone, and just in a very narrow cave, even rubbing up to these petroglyphs like with a pack on your back would damage it. So we really give a lot of credit for having these preserved for the future, but we have to be very critical as researchers and diffusionists that they really don't acknowledge the previous research and documentation that I believe proves that these were not created by ancestors of the Native Americans. They were definitely created by people who knew how to write Ogham, which is a writing system, in a Gaelic language. They knew archaeoastronomy, and they're even invoking, Grian and Bel. So they're talking about festivals. So to ignore this and to say and just blanket that these were created by the Native Americans or their ancestors is really what I'm talking about, how the record has been expunged.
Yeah, I don't know how there's any argument. Really, the the people that made those petroglyphs, like you were saying, they had to be knowledgeable in astronomy. They had to be knowledgeable in Ogham writings and festivals over there, and even in like the Anubis caves, the following of Mithra or Mithras. How do they even correlate that to Native American? I mean, and then they just dismiss it, or they don't even bring it up, like you talked about when you were there. They just don't. They don't acknowledge it, like it doesn't exist. I mean, I don't know how there's any argument. How could that be? I've even read articles where people say that it's graffiti.
Bill tells a great story, and Phil Leonard and Bill McGlone, spent decades defending their work against the archaeopriest and the archaeologist. And again, they really had solid evidence. And in one of the debates, one of the archaeologists accused Bill and Phil of actually forging these petroglyphs and this writing at the Anubis cave. And what Bill said in response was that the cowboy graffiti from the late 1800s was written over the inscriptions, and he used that as proof that these inscriptions were made before. I think the date was 1890 something, and that was long before he was born. So the archaeopriest community will throw anything they can to discredit legitimate researchers and legitimate research. And Bill and Phil Leonard really, had a very frustrating career, as many diffusionists have. I talk about the work of Gunnar Thompson, who wrote an incredible book called American Discovery, and he talks about many instances of diffusion in old world travelers in America. And he was, very much discredited, even though he was an anthropologist. He did eventually get his doctorate, but they wouldn't publish his dissertation. He was never given any kind of tenure or. In short, the gatekeepers, the archaeopriests, were able to keep Dr. Thompson from any kind of stature, even though his pioneering work demonstrated a direct link between Asian symbols and symbols that were in use by the Mayans for 400 years. So this is just another, of hundreds of examples where credible researchers have been, if not ignored, discredited.
Mm-hmm. Man, what an amazing site. I guess I wished I could see it, but so much of it is not available to the public. And then the fact that it's disappearing slowly right in front of us, I mean, that kind of makes me sad too. And I guess what gives me the greatest pause, I guess, with an awe, is not just the fact that they knew how to do it, not the fact that they did do it, but the patience it must have taken to do it. I mean, you'd have to have these alignments, and then you got to wait a whole nother year to see if it even worked out right, and if it was off by just a little bit, then you'd have to make a correction if you even could, and then you'd have to wait a whole nother. I mean, talk about moving at a much slower pace than today moves. I mean, now you can instantly just rewind your television or fast forward or edit something out completely. It's incredible. Now, I guess, Carl, there's nothing they can. I know you said it's in very fragile sandstone, but is there nothing that they can do to preserve it or try to extend its life? I mean, I even remember reading that one guy was trying to make molds of it, and he accidentally peeled part of the wall off or something, which ruined it.
Yeah, that was at Anubis Cave, and again, that's why I acknowledge the work of the Comanche National Grasslands and in general. The Bureau of Land Management at many sites at really doing the best that we can to protect these sites. And, I myself have been severely criticized by BLM archaeologists for, discussing these and pointing out the importance of these. And while I don't note any locations except the ones that are on public lands, and in many cases I don't even talk about where those are, we have to take the position that preservation is the most important thing we can do. And that's why Phil Leonard and Bill McGlone's efforts to get Crack Cave protected is a great example that people cannot get in there and do graffiti. They do open it up on occasion to researchers, and in coordination with the city of Springfield, if they could bring back the Equinox festival. Events like this are the way to do it, and there are institutions that have taken it upon themselves to do this. However, most of them have to do with sites that are considered, ancestors of the Native Americans. Crack Cave is really a unique example where it is possible, although not easy, to get in and see the equinox alignment and photograph the Ogham script, so that one can compare it with the type of Ogham script that appears in Ireland and on runes and markers that are found in Europe. So preservation is the most important thing we can do right now. And in the case of some of these other sites, for example, in the one site that I talk about in the book from California that seems to have its origin with Indus Valley civilization, perhaps 1,000 years before the Celts, and perhaps even longer. It's been a running battle, if you will, between both the archaeologists and the Native Americans who claim this to be a Native American site to get any protection. And as you've said several times on this show, the record is just disappearing in front of our eyes, between the vandalism, between the graffiti, between the wear. In the case of this California site, acid rain is eating away at this. So preservation has to be the most important thing we do, because what we're going to find is that as smart as we think we are, with being able to read the inscriptions or being able to interpret the archaeoastronomy, we know that scientists in the future are going to have better tools to be able to, for example, do carbon testing or radioactive testing of the patina that'll give us an exact date, for example, or in the case of cultural anthropology, by being able to get high-resolution photographs, we're going to see more details that will help us to understand, the symbols and where they came from in the old world. The same can be said of epigraphy, which is studying of writing. Now, this is not going to happen until diffusionism is legitimized. You will not be able to go to National Geographic or the Smithsonian and look at back issues of the Celts' travels in America, or Ogham writing in America, or did the Romans ever make it to America? It's not there. They don't talk about it. So we have to preserve these sites for open-minded and fair-minded research that is not happening today. If you were to go to the Four Corners area on any given summer, you would find scores and scores of archaeologists and graduate students dotting, all these ruins and documenting them, and that's good. That's a good thing. But you go to some of these sacred sites that feature Celtic Ogham or connections to Indus Valley. There's no one there. There's no archaeologists there studying it. There's nobody writing it up. Now, the interesting thing that 60 Minutes did a story on Anubis Cave and on Crack Cave, and it was aired live, and it was just they got the alignment perfectly. So this was done by professional cameramen, and they interviewed Bill McGlone. It aired on 60 Minutes. So I'm not making the discovery here. I'm going back to the record. I'm interviewing Bill McGlone. I'm interviewing Phil Leonard, just like 60 Minutes did. So the information is there. It's just been covered up.
It's so frustrating. I don't even know what to say. We were even talking a little bit off air. We discussed Cahokia, and most of all the listeners know Cahokia. But when you talk about losing things, I know that we've lost part of the Poverty Point culture. already. And that's another one of those large earthen mound works that needs to be studied.
Well, Poverty Point in Louisiana is one of the most significant ancient ruins in America. Much of it has been destroyed, but most of the archaeological community sees this as part of the mound building culture. But I'd like to believe that Point, which is located near the Mississippi, was almost a welcome center for ancient travelers coming into the Gulf of Mexico and up the Mississippi. Now, it also they've discovered some type of early smelting artifacts down there, and this makes sense of the copper coming down the Mississippi and having it be reshuffled in the Poverty Point area for ships that would take it across through the Mississippi into the Gulf and then across the Atlantic. So there's a huge story with Poverty Point that is really not mentioned in the archaeological record, and something that I think will be forthcoming in coming years. So it can be said of the whole mound builder culture. The Smithsonian researchers, even though they did find evidence of, and they did find artifacts of a European origin in some of these mounds, they don't talk about it. In fact, they specifically said, we will not talk about it. We found it, but we won't talk about it. So opening up the records is right behind preservation of these sites in terms of how we're going to open our eyes to the true history of America.
Well, it's like they have their minds made up, and then they just look for things to back up their ideas. And we've discussed this numerous times with different interviews on the show, and that's what makes it the most frustrating, is the fact that if it doesn't fit inside their box, and I say they as a broad term, but it would be the academic belief of what we are teaching our young people today. If it doesn't fit inside that box, then they throw it away as it just can't be. If it doesn't fit, it can't be. And the fact that there shouldn't be a box, it should be a table. And it should be all laid out, and let's read the facts that we're given. I mean, it's a good thing that people that research murder investigations don't go along these same ideas that we research history, or we would never solve a thing, because the facts are, it's right in front of you. It's okay to believe that there were other cultures coming here, that this was like I love the fact that you said it was more like what you believe is a welcome center. It reminds me a lot of the same thing now that you bring it up. As they traveled, right there it was. There's a place for you to rest. There's a place for you to eat. There's a place for everybody to get together. It's kind of like a visitor center. Well, here's a map. If you go that way, you get to this. If you go this way, you get to that. Don't go that way. They don't like us over there. The rest of it is kind of open to everybody else. And you think about that for people traveling, it's almost like it's like an old world truck stop. You're going to bump in and run into all kinds of people, all makes and all models at this big area. And the fact that they are not looking at it that way is the most frustrating thing in the world. And that's what I appreciate the most about your book and everyone else, but the most about your book is the fact that you keep it fresh. Just like that, I didn't know anything about Crack Cave. I didn't know anything, the Cave Hollow. Those are things that I think people need to know about, because there may be somebody listening right now that has a family member that lives there close that can help preservation, can throw some money at it, can get up and get out there and go, look, let's not let this disappear. You may believe it's nothing, but I don't. I believe there's something to it. I know that the Heavener Runestone was in a state park for a while, and then it kind of lost funding, but at least they had a cover. They put it in an area of safety. It's one of those things that little things like that go a long way to prolonging this, like you said, until we get the ability to study it even further. Look at the things that we've just discovered over the last 20 years of as far as human history. Everything is changing. So that's what I appreciate so much of the hard work you put into this book, is it keeps it fresh and it keeps it on people's minds.
Well, thank you for that, and I'll just use that as a jumping off point to talk about the challenges that we face, and it's not just the archaeo priest and kind of the closed-minded attitudes. Unfortunately, the record is filled with fakes, hoaxes, and frauds. And as a researcher going into the field and going to museums and looking at this stuff, I'm sad to report that many of my colleagues and many diffusionists have really, I think, gone down rabbit holes and not done the good research and been taken in by some of these frauds. There were just a period of time in American history. It was I think they called it the Great Age of Hoaxes. And many of the artifacts that diffusionists claim today are ancient are not at all. And just like you had mentioned, the scientific basis of demonstrating that copper, found throughout the world came, from Michigan in the ancient world. There, we're using science to prove that they came to America and were here. Science also proves that some of these fakes that were perpetuated using modern metals that were smelted with advanced techniques. So it's not really as simple as one thinks, and not as straightforward. And in some cases, the record and the road comes to a dead end. You just can't go any farther. A great case is the supposed Egyptian cave and artifacts that were found in the Grand Canyon in the early 1900s. And there are headlines appeared in the newspapers, and they interviewed the archaeologist, and they talk about these discoveries. But after 3 days, there's nothing more. These were an expedition sponsored by the Smithsonian. Now the Smithsonian denied it even happened. Yet the area that these discoveries were supposed to have originated from in the Grand Canyon have been off limits ever since then. You cannot get back in and look at it.
Right.
It's a danger, but they won't let an expedition in. So it's a very challenging area of research, because the archaeo-priest gatekeepers has been so difficult to penetrate. And I think I could say that my colleagues and researchers that I relied upon were probably better writers, more thorough researchers than I. Yet you can go down the list: Barry Fell, Gunnar Thompson, and the dozens of researchers that I cite in my book have never been able to break through the archaeo-priesthood. So my book is building upon their research, is just one more attempt in a long line to educate people about their history and to insist that we open up the records.
Well, that's great. Where can people find your book?
Well, thank you. My site is newhistoryofamerica.com. That's www.newhistoryofamerica.com. And I talk a little about the background of the book and my background, and that's a great place to get the book. It's also available at Amazon and other fine bookstores.
Are you going to be doing any book signings or any speeches or lectures coming up?
Well, I love these radio shows because I can be in my slippers in my home with my cup of coffee. But the truth be known, I'm a renewable energy entrepreneur. I almost work full time at that. The writing the New History of America and my passion for that really takes a second stage to promoting a renewable future. So that's really the focus of my professional career. But I do expect to be doing book tours and more radio shows. I love to do lectures. I love shows where there's an interaction and we get people that talk about their stories and what they found when they were kids and what their ancestors came here and did. So that's really the greatest part of being a new author is getting the feedback from people out there. And my hope is to inspire them and inspire young graduate students, young students, so that when we get in these high school and college classes, it's not the teachers or the professors that are pushing. It's the students that said, hey, what about Crack Cave, where they have this writing system called Ogham that you can read in a Celtic language. It's going to take those students, those graduate students, pushing the institutions for this to open up. So I like my mentors, Bill McGlone and Philip Sloan, were an inspiration to me. I hope I can be an inspiration to a new generation of fair-minded researchers and archaeologists.
Well, Carl, I don't have any doubt that you probably will. The book was great, and we thank you so much for coming on and spending the time with us. If you ever get interested in wanting to come on and chat again, please don't hesitate to let us know. We are really thankful. All of us are thankful for the book and for all the information you give us, man, and we really appreciate it.
Kyle and Cam, thank you so much, and it was really a fun hour. I'd love to come back, and I wish you and your audience good journeys.
And we're back with Expanded Perspectives. I hope everybody enjoyed that interview with Carl Lehrburger. That was an incredible one. I really enjoyed it. What do you think?
I love it. Anything that has to do with history, like we always say, people get tired of hearing me say it, but yeah, that's my thing. I really enjoy that.
Man, I wish I could get permission, special permission from some of these private landowners that have these, sites on their property. And I could go out and look at them. And just like I talked about before, it always makes me think whenever I'm reading one of these books or hearing someone give a lecture, or just how many more places are there that have just been undiscovered, or through the sands of time has just withered away and is melted and that is no longer there. These petroglyphs, these pictographs, whatever has been washed away or scraped off or just vandalized or graffitied over, or who knows, just lost to time. And, how many more things, like I was speaking before, every time I go down the Brazos River or anything on a canoe trip, I'm always looking at the sandstone or the limestone walls. I'm always looking for something, and I'm sure everything along the river has been explored. But man, there could be other things, or just like the artifacts we talked about, like the Arizona artifacts, those crosses. I mean, the guy just happened to see that sticking out of a piece of caliche.
And how many's still out there?
How many more artifacts are out there like that?
And it always makes me wonder, too, is how many of those old guys, I mean, I've known a bunch of old ranchers and landowners as I've grown up and hunted on a bunch of ranches and things. And a lot of those guys that's not what their mind's about. They're not thinking about ancient history. They're thinking about raising cattle, making some money. Yeah. They're running more cows, they're doing the things, keeping the hogs down, stuff like that. So if there was anything like that in certain caves and things, they don't think anything of it. And I know numerous times that they're just like, they call them old Indian stuff. That's just old Indian caves and things like that. Everything is old Indian stuff. That's it, So I don't know, I'm with you, is how many things have just been overlooked by the people there because it doesn't affect their life. They don't think anything of it, so they don't report on it. So I think that happens often, more often than not, really.
Right. Pretty incredible. Moving on, I'd like to give some shout-outs this week.
Yeah.
We haven't done any in quite a while, and I'd like to thank some people. From the USA, I'd like to thank Turtle Legs and Shandy Jack. Thank you very much for the reviews you wrote. In Canada, CB Woodsman, thank you very much. I saw
Thank
that you
you.
posted one on there. From the United Kingdom, Mr. Sam Sheeran.
Oh, thank you,
Sheeran,
sir.
I'm sorry, Sheeran. And Rich from Hinckley, UK. Danny Phipps, 87, and Welsh Damien. Thank you very much.
Ooh, holla. Thanks, guys.
Right? We always appreciate those reviews. If you're new to the show, please go to iTunes, write us a review, rate the show. We really enjoy it. Don't forget, we also have an Elite show every Thursday. You folks, if you're not a member of Elite, you're really missing out. Last week, we did a story about the Russian cauldrons. We've done some stories about the Mantis Man, the Dover Demon,
Yep.
Ouija board anomalies, all kinds of things. And if you're just missing out, I mean, it's $5 a month. Literally, I mean, that's like a number one special at McDonald's.
Well,
and that's just one lunch. I mean, this is for the whole month, and some months have 5. So for certain 2 times a year, there's going to be 5 Thursdays in that month. You're literally paying $1 a show.
Yeah.
Very cheap.
Yeah, and what do we got coming up on this one? We're going to be doing a little UFOs, and we're going to discuss a strange thing.
Thomas Mantell.
Yep, and we're going to discuss a little stickman sightings and stuff. Folks, if you want to call the show, we've still got the phone number up. It's 817-945-3828. You can call, tell us what you love about the show. You can call, make fun of Kyle's hair and how it's not there. It's fine. We don't care. It's the whole deal. You can jump right on that thing. I've got a couple of shout-outs I want to throw out there,
All right,
too.
let's hear it.
I want to give a shout out to Mr. Derek Vincent Smith, the man behind the music that you hear on this show of Pretty Lights. Folks, without him, the show, I feel, would just kind of be devoid. I mean, I love his music, everything about it. You please support him. You can go YouTube. He's constantly pumping out music on YouTube. You can follow him on his channel. You can follow him on Twitter, Facebook. You can go on iTunes and download his music. It's all there. I mean, just jump right in the middle. And also, too, a big shout out to the Black Angels. They're the ones that actually allow us to use the intro music from them, the Lost and Band, and they get to, for our
on the Elite show.
The
That's
Elite
right,
show. Yeah. And if you like, Kyle and I always kind of equate it to where it sounds like the Doors. And that's what him and I, we just, that's the kind of music we kind of grew up with, and that's what we like. So thanks so much to those two. Those folks right there are the ones that also kind of help us. And we jam out to that music like crazy here in studio. So that's kind of what gets the ball rolling.
Oh, that's funny. Today when you first got here in studio, we were getting notes and stuff together. We were rocking out to some Eazy-E. I'm like old school
Yeah, we had
Eazy-E,
some
right?
old school Eazy-E going.
Some songs from early days, back the NWA days that I haven't heard in so long. And you think they're going to mess that movie up?
Yeah, they're going to mess that movie up. Are you
Right?
kidding? You can't make a movie about that. There's certain things you just don't touch, and that's one of them.
I agree. They're going to screw it up royally.
Yeah, completely.
Yeah, well, everybody have a good week. For you elitist members, we will speak to you on Thursday. For everybody else, we'll speak to you next Monday. And if you're not elitist and you want to catch this Thursday, sign up. Go to theexpandedperspectives.com. Top right corner of the website, you can click on there. Signing up is easy. Just do it through PayPal. Sign up for the year or month to month. Either way, I'm not trying to push it on you too hard. But if you like the show and would like to hear more, there are more shows available. Cam, you got anything else?
Nope. Everybody just stay safe. I know it's cold and snowy and bad weather in a lot of places out there, and for everybody that's working and all that in it, just try to stay warm and try to stay safe. We'll plow through this, and we'll get on into the spring and the summer and have a much better time. So everybody just take care.
Peace.